I do think one of the problems in Tokyo is the juxtaposition between the games we are getting and the games you can imagine happening. So the first thing I would do is get rid of the pandemic. We're not going to do that. And odds are it's going to get much worse in Beijing. Like if this is the no fun games, Beijing will be like the reform school games. The things the Japanese are kind of letting slide in terms of COVID, even though it bothers them, the Chinese, I assume, will not. So the next fun games, if we were going to do that, would be Paris in 2024. Knock wood, God willing, this is all done and in the review by then. What would I change about Paris? For Paris, I would say, stop adding sports. Enormous skill. I am not trying to denigrate these things as activities, but surfing does not belong in the Olympics. And the reason I would suggest it doesn't belong in the Olympics is we don't need more judged sports. That opens all kinds of nonsense. Of course, people like it the first time out because it's new. But once you're seeing it for the third, fourth, and fifth time, people begin to wonder, why are these in the Olympics? Because it more seems like an activity, a hobby. The other thing I would do that I think is inevitable, it's just a matter of time of how long they want to prolong the pain. I think you have to anchor both games in a permanent city. The obvious one for summer would be Athens, the birthplace of the Olympic movement. A lot of people seem to think Lillehammer, everybody remembers that as the best winter games, would be an obvious, but there is an issue there, of course, because that means both games would be in Europe. But when you switch it city to city, you are opening yourself up to all kinds of logistical problems on the ground. Like Tokyo, I assume, has enormous funding, administrative capacity. I mean, it is one of the world's great functioning democracies, and their logistics are bad. Like these are not good logistics. They're having a lot of trouble. The pandemic is part of that, but I think it's simply a matter of trying to host something like this, not having done it in many, many years. One of the things that I think will naturally happen is that the world is going to set against each other to a certain extent, and the Olympics will be the place where those animosities, if that's the right word, will be played out in a somewhat harmless fashion. Where certain countries want to beat certain other countries, but right now we're getting it in a bit of an ugly way. Like we've seen incidences here where a couple of judokas refused to fight an Israeli fighter because of concerns about the Palestinian cause. That's a problem for the Olympics going forward because obviously it's political, but it needs to be depoliticized on the ground. You can't have the athletes politicized because that strikes at the core of the games, which is the friendliness, it's the community of sports. At a certain point, they like to talk about it's all about the athletes and this and that. You go into the venues and you realize, why are we here? It's not about the athletes, it's about the broadcasters. This is about satisfying contractual obligations. And they will have done that. But every time they do this, I think they chip away at the edifice. And the Olympics is sold on the basis that it is a pristine brand. Everything about it is pure. Well, that's not what you think of when you think of the Olympics over the last 10 years.